grow up, you tend to sort of understand the environment that you're in, and then that's really when you start to, you know, understand things about mental health from a young age. Even though you don't know it as a concept, it does develop from that age. My upbringing, although I was very much loved by the people in my family, it was still what I would call a broken home. So my mom divorced my dad a couple of years after I was born. I'm the youngest child, one of four, and that was a huge deal in our community because divorce was sort of unheard of. You basically put up with whatever relationship you were in, and credit to my mom for leaving him because it was a domestic violence type of relationship, and she did leave him, and that was the first time I started to feel different to other children, especially other Asian children, because they all had moms and dads and I didn't have a dad growing up. So that was probably the first sort of conscious thought, I am a bit different, something isn't right. As time went on, you start to see more and more things, especially in the South Asian community. So you can see things like sexism, racism, colorism was a huge thing. So for those of you who don't know, colorism is where somebody of an ethnic group looks down upon another person of the same ethnic group because they have a dark skin tone. I have a dark skin tone growing up. I was always kind of bullied as a young age. I was called an ape and all sorts of things by people that were also Asian. So that was another thing that affected my mental health as a child. And then I think the hardest thing for me growing up was when I was 10 years old. My eldest sister, who was 20 at the time, passed away. And because I didn't really have, you know, it hit everybody differently. And Asians tend not to mourn very well when it comes to a young death. And I didn't have anyone to speak to. So that, you know, started a very rocky road in terms of my teenage years. All of this kind of built up. My mind was going back and forward, thinking about all sorts of things. And at the age of 15, I started drinking alcohol. I did it quite socially with friends and families because there was no sort of age limit, age restriction when it came to our sort of family. But it started to develop as more of a problem. So where it became a weekend drink at weddings drinks, I slowly started drinking on a daily basis and then by myself. And next thing you know, I'm drinking too much. And I mention this because it really affected my mental health, because I was kind of masking the underlying issues, which was there's a pain in my heart right now. I've got nobody to speak to. I don't know what I'm doing in life. I've got no role models, no guidance. And I was just drinking my troubles away. I remember how badly it hurt my mum when I used to drink a lot. And she would always talk about how ashamed she is of me and she should never have had me, things like that. So it was a rocky relationship with my mum as well. And I remember one night when I came home absolutely drunk, went to sleep, I had a dream that I vomited over the bedroom floor, and I woke up and I saw a pile of clothes there, and I thought, hang on, they weren't there when I went to sleep. And lo and behold, when I lifted them up, vomit everywhere, and I was so embarrassed. And I was determined to clean it up before my mum saw, because I didn't want to, you know, make her any more sadder than I was making her. Now, all these things were kind of building up, and I was at a very low point, heaviness in my heart, had no guidance. And this is where finding faith came into it. I had some friends that I played football with that were into faith, specifically Sikhi, which is my faith. And they started having conversations just about our history and our heritage. And I think the turning point for me there was, however, when I really started to connect with my faith, was when I learned about my own name. So my name is Harpreet, which is pronounced Harpreet. Har means God and Preet means love. And if you translate it forwards, it means God's love. But if you translate it backwards, it means the love for God. And so for me, that built a two-way connection of love that I didn't necessarily have before. And the more I sort of explored my faith, the more I started asking questions that I never asked before. Why am I here? What am I here to do? Why do bad things happen? And suddenly I started to find answers, and the wandering mind managed to still itself through my faith. So this chapter is very important because it laid the foundations to my sort of good mental health now, because I found faith at the time and it was everything that I needed, because, like I said, it asked the right questions and gave me a routine and something, a bit of a purpose and identity. So the key learning points of this chapter are essentially identity forms the root of good mental health. So when it comes to especially the South Asian community, bear in mind, we've migrated over this sort of generational trauma. Linking back to your roots can really help with your mental health. The other point is that Sikhi, my religion, is 550 years old. There are religions that are older, there are philosophies that are older. Sometimes I think people shy away from looking at sort of old things because they feel it's outdated, but there's some very good wisdom in religion, faith and philosophy that we can definitely apply to our mental health practices now. And the last thing is faith, culture and heritage within the workplace. So for me, being able to be myself at work, being able to talk about my faith, my culture and my heritage at work really helps with my mental well-being. So that's just for anybody that's in the workplace. Just think, how diverse is your workplace? And are you giving your staff the ability to be themselves, because it can affect their mental health. Moving on to sort of the second chapter is my sort of wedding. So this is me and my wife on our wedding day. Specifically chose this one because I just feel it's very humbling. You know, we put our hands together and we prayed to God that we didn't mess up the marriage, you know. I think that was my main prayer at the time. Marriage is a huge thing, especially in the South Asian community, because going back only a couple of decades, everybody got married before they were 20. It was a given. It was arranged marriage. And then slowly but surely over the last couple of decades, people are getting married later in life, not arranged marriages, through love marriages, etc. And if an elder asks you a question, they'll ask you 3 questions in this order. They'll say, what's your name? What do you do for a living? Are you married yet? And that's not, it's funny when you're in your early 20s, but when you're pushing 30, you really start to question yourself and your own sort of, am I the right person? Why aren't I married yet? And it really puts a lot of pressure in terms of your mind. When I did get married, it was an experience, to say the least. I got engaged in May. I got married in September, so I didn't have enough time to think, okay, I'm getting married now. I need to really focus and, you know, knuckle down on who I am as a person. And I kind of just walked into it a little blindly. My wife came into the marriage with her baggage. I came into my marriage with my baggage, and we just didn't know how to deal with it. And we joke about it now, but I think the first year was a complete write-off because we just argued about a lot of things. The first argument was about soup. She insists that it's food. I still say it's a hot drink. You know, we agree to disagree on this one. But I think the key point here is that we work together in a relationship because we didn't really have anyone else to turn to, especially in the South Asian community, because the moment you start telling the elders that your marriage isn't doing too well, they panic. So you don't want that to happen. The moment you share it with your friends and family, they start judging and, you know, they think, oh, there must be something wrong with you as a person. When there isn't. Everybody goes through their own trials and tribulations, you know, egos clash, cultures clash. And because we were able to deal with it, I think it really worked well for my mental well-being, and I learned a lot through just being married, because I was able to confide in my wife. And I use the word my mirror because she kind of showed me my true self. Up until that point, my life was very theoretical. I had faith, I had job, I had consistency, but nobody was dependent upon me. I wasn't dependent upon anyone else, and I was almost living in a bubble. But then when my wife came in, I really saw myself for what I was, and I thought, okay, I need to do a lot of work here now. And she made me a better person and made me tackle my sort of mental health head on. And the other point I want to make here is that sometimes, especially later in life, nobody prepares you for how reliant you are upon other people for your mental health, and vice versa. So sometimes you've got to be strong for other people, and they need to be strong for yourself. Or sometimes you both need to just say, you know what, hands up, not feeling very great, let's work on it together. And it's that honesty that you get through sort of marriage that I really want to talk about here. So, you know, if now when I see other people getting married, I always make sure I ask the proper question, not is the honeymoon period over? I say, how are you actually dealing with it? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? And I found that a lot of people, when I was sharing about my marriage quite openly on social media, I was getting lots of messages from people from my community saying, you're very brave to share that, because people fear the judgment. But when you share it, people connect, people relate, and everybody can learn, and mental health sort of gets better as a collective. So the key learning from this chapter is as relationships change, so does our well-being. So our relationships are constantly changing when you get new friends, short-term, long-term, colleagues, family, marriage, children, etc., etc. Don't expect your mental health to be the same the whole way through. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, but you should learn to talk about it and then deal with it sooner rather than later. And the second point is other people's mental health can definitely impact our own. So for me, my wife really opened up my eyes to the women in my family. I grew up with 3 sisters and a mum, surrounded by women completely oblivious to their mental health. So that has helped me become a better person and see other people's mental health as well. And the last one is anyone can actually be a mirror to measure your well-being. So these are more for the loved ones that are in your inner circle. You can use them as a mirror to see where you are, and, you know, they can help you with regards to your mental health in that sense. And then the final chapter is more to do with sort of where I am now. It's quite recent, and I call it Breaking the Stigma. If you want to click next, Zoe, that's great. So in this one, I am sitting on a fence, and there's a reason for that. I was bored and it was locked down and I had nothing to do. But this picture now actually serves its purpose, because it kind of takes me to what the final point I want to mention today. And it's people of a South Asian community, especially when they practice a faith, can shy away from talking about mental health and well-being and using sort of modern tools to help them with it. I remember a couple of years ago, I was very stressed at work. I was feeling very burnt out. There was a lot happening. I was on the 3rd floor, finished my shift half an hour later than I was meant to, at 8:30 instead of 8. Got into the lift, the door shut, pressed the ground floor, and I started daydreaming. And I was thinking about all sorts of things, you know, what's going to happen in the future? What's my life like right now? Am I heading in the right direction? And then about 15 minutes later, I looked at my watch, it's 8:45. And I'm thinking, where did 15 minutes go? And why am I still stuck in the lift? And then when I checked, I had never pressed the ground floor. I just got in the lift, the door shut, and I was just stuck in the lift. And I was thinking, what a beautiful metaphor of where my life is right now. I'm not going up, I'm not going down, and I'm very much stuck. At that point, I decided I got three options. I can either leave the job, it's not working for me. I can take long-term sick, and those two options a lot of my colleagues did take, or I can actually talk about it. And I was brave enough at this point, having gone through everything I've gone through my life and through my marriage, to reach out to managers and say, I'm not feeling very well, what can we do about it? And they put provisions in place to make sure that my mental health is in the right place for me to do my job. And this was a win-win, because I didn't feel bad about my mental health, and I was still able to perform and support the business. From then on, I decided I can't be the only one feeling this way. And the more I had the conversation about well-being and mental health, the more everybody had something to say about it. And then when I brought the inclusion gender into it, because that's quite close to my heart as well, I found that the two link very well. So inclusion, culture and faith, and well-being, mental, physical, etc. Those two link very well, because as you're hearing today from the story, everyone has a story to tell, everyone has a different background, and it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to mental health. So I kind of worked on how can we bring the two together and really sort of look at people's personal identities and how it affects their well-being. Because truth be told, if a lot of the stuff I learned in well-being has come through work in terms of the mental health aspect, but I've taken it out and kind of tried to help push it in the community as well. And I'm quite fortunate. If this had happened to me 10, 15 years ago, my response would have been totally different. But now I feel comfortable enough to talk about it. And there are other sort of charities out there like Seek Your Mind, Tarakki, who help with men's mental health from a faith aspect as well, and a Punjabi cultural aspect. And this just helps open up the dialogue, because Zoe, you probably remember when Nadia Hussein, you asked her, well, what's the word for sort of mental health in your culture? And she said mad. And that's where the sort of language barrier and the cultural barrier kicks in. So we're trying to sort of translate what mental health is and show people that it's okay to talk about it. And the sort of analogy here is twofold. You shouldn't really sit on the fence when it comes to mental health. You should really, push forward and take it seriously. But the other one is as well, there's two sides to this fence, isn't there? You've got faith on one side and well-being on the other. And when it comes to sort of well-being, mental health, if it suffers, the first thing that goes is your faith practices. So if you do something on a daily basis, that will go first, and that should be a key sign something's not right here. And you can't always rely on your sort of faith or believe more, pray more to become sort of healthier in the mind. You need to use other supports. And one example I'll give to kind of finish off is recently I had a bereavement. I lost two close family members, one to coronavirus, the other to a stroke in the space of a week, and it knocked me for six. I've had death before in the family, but this one really hit me hard. And I reached out to not friends, family, but I used an employees assistance program, which is free service that NatWest provide. And I spoke to a counsellor, and it's the first time in my life at the age of 31 I actually spoke to a counsellor about it, and I felt so much better for it. So I didn't just do it privately, I did it, I shared it, I was very honest about it, my experience, and I'm encouraging other people to do the same as well, because we need to bring these things together and make it sort of normalize it, break the stigma within the Asian community. So the key learnings for this are essentially, there is faith in well-being and there is well-being in faith. The two are so intertwined, you don't have to separate the two. The second point is it's important to use the support where available, even if you haven't used it before. I feel that my generation are pioneers now. We're the first to do it. And I suppose everybody fears change, everybody fears the unknown, but when one person starts to do it, it has a knock-on effect and it becomes normalized within the community. And the last thing is there's no such thing as a taboo subject when it comes to mental health, and that's within the workplace, outside, community and family. Breaking the taboo, breaking the stigma is key, especially when it comes from the BAME community when dealing with mental health. So those are the three chapters, and I guess the key thing is really, there's so many different angles when it comes to mental health, and it all starts with, taking it seriously and doing something about it.
Thank you so much, Harpreet. Really fascinating and very open and honest with you. And I know you're keen for people to connect with you, to have conversations. Hence, I've put up your Instagram and LinkedIn, and I'm sure people are going to have questions for you. I know I've got questions for you, but I'll save them until later. But thank you, Harpreet, very, very much indeed. So now I would like to introduce to you our next ambassador, and our next ambassador is Sylvia Bruce, and I'm just going to hand straight over to her. Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and thank you, Harpreet. That was really interesting and fantastic learnings, and thank you for sharing those. So, part one, a difficult start, as it says there, and this is a painting of my childhood that I did when I was in counselling and art therapy training. I grew up in a working class, dysfunctional family, quite violent and abusive. I always felt quite the outcast, quite the odd one out, and very alone. I did okay at school. Probably could have done better because I was damned if I did well and damned if I didn't. And at 18, my father got me a job in banking and no one said no to him. So there was none of that university nonsense for you, my lady. So I was straight into work. But like school, work was my escape and I loved it. It was absolutely great fun. And it was fun meeting new people, fun learning new things. It was brilliant. And I progressed well and I was fairly good at it. And then 2 years later, I got married. So can I have the next slide, please, Zoe? And then this happened. In a nutshell, that's what happened. So I might as well stop here, but I will continue. Now this is a painting of my depression. And I did this when I was actually in counselling. So I did it a few years before the one on slide one. And I did this because I didn't have the ability to express, articulate myself. So I thought I'd paint it. Each colour is an emotion and it's really underpinned by an absolutely tremendous sense of failure. It's quite light on the outside and it gets faster and faster towards the middle. And that's a bit like me, really. It was turmoil and self-destruction on the inside. But what had happened? You know, after all, I was doing okay to all intents and purposes. People saw everything was fine. But it was a personal perfect storm. It was a series of life events in my personal life. It was absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with work. It was underpinned by experiences that no one should have, least of all in their childhood. My toxic, controlling marriage had come to a turbulent end. There had been gaslighting and elements of coercive control. And I'd also been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. But I carried on working. I still had my job. I carried on working because in my head, what stays at home, what happens at home stays at home. You don't bring your home life to work and you just get on with it. So I wore a mask at work. I used to work at the time on the 5th floor. I used to walk to work really miserable, press the button for the 5th floor, on went the mask, doors opened, ta-da! What are we doing today? It was a performance. But no one saw when I got home and closed the door. I didn't want people to see that. And I didn't like seeing it myself. But the mask protected me. It enabled me to do the one thing that I could cling on to that I was any good at, that I thought I was any good at. And it gave me a semblance of normality and it enabled me to escape from my personal demons for a time. I'd had I don't want to be here thoughts some time before this. I sensed I wasn't okay, miserable, isolated, alone, failure, but how to convey the depth of despair, the depth of feeling that one had. And at that time, mental health was very much a taboo. No one spoke about mental health. I had no idea about depression. I had tried to talk, but I felt people go, oof. So I shut down. I didn't talk. I thought I'd cope. There's a line from a Robbie Williams song. The lyrics goes, I don't want to die, but I'm not keen on living either. And that just sums up how I was at this time. Things deteriorated. And after my third failed attempt at ending my own life, I finally went to my GP. I didn't write any notes to anyone. There wasn't anyone to write notes to. There were no children. That was another factor in our marriage, and there's various reasons for that. For me, right at this moment, losing my life wasn't the worst thing that could happen. I'd lost any reason to live. There was no reason for me to carry on. And horses and horse riding had always been my enduring passion, but not even she, or even right this moment now, my job wasn't enough. I remember, and also at this moment, I felt that no one cared. No one loved me. I was unlovable. I was alone. No one would hear me. No one would believe me. No one saw or cared to see my pain. And I also didn't believe anyone was strong enough to handle my story. And also at this moment, again, I literally had lost the will to live. I also felt embarrassed and humiliated that I was in this position, especially in society when everyone talks about families and support, and that further reinforced the belief that I was a failure. So failing to earn my own life was further proof to me up here that I was a failure. I remember saying to my GP, and there was lots of swearing because I was so angry, but I remember saying, I'm such a failure, I cannot even do myself in. Please, will you help me to live? And then I had the diagnosis of major depression and probably been struggling for some time after that. Now, but having that conversation with myself, admitting that I needed help, and having that conversation with my GP not only saved my life, it changed and absolutely transformed my life. And this is a bit that might sound trite and cheesy, but it absolutely transformed from mental ill health to full recovery and beyond. Because with medication and counselling, I transformed. I made a real amazing recovery. And I learned that sometimes we have no choice but what happens to us. But we do have a choice how we manage it. I worked throughout, again, giving me a break from the looking at all my personal demons. I had a brilliant line manager who accommodated all my appointments. But I was a chicken. I never told him about my mental ill health. It was easier to tell him about my cancer, and I recovered from that as well. But as I recovered, I saw that spiral. Instead of it going down, it started to come back up. And it was incredible. And I had a light bulb moment. Again, really? But yes, really. I really had a light bulb moment. I remember saying to my counsellor, it must be amazing for you to see someone like me coming in at death's door, and then gradually engage, re-engage, start to talk and re-engage with the world and start to see that life is worth living. I remember in that moment saying, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do for others what you've done for me. And I want to give to others what you've given me. So, and of course, it also awakened a passion, just adding there. It awakened a passion and a fire in my belly that I'd never had. My job was my job. It was just a job. And I didn't get this thing about doing your job as your passion. Didn't get it. I did now. So alongside my day job, I trained to be an integrative counsellor and art therapy training and some very highly specialised training, and volunteered for a UK charity. And in the workplace, something interesting happened. I was re-energised and reinvigorated. My career blossomed. I was regularly headhunted. I moved into investment banking and moved into managerial and leadership roles. And at HSBC, as a director in global banking markets at the sharp end of business, I created a team known as best on the street in the business and product globally, managing a multi-billion-dollar portfolio. And I also moved into personal and professional development and performance management, because also alongside my day job, I trained to be an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming coach, master coach, and blending my lifelong passion with horses, an equine assisted NLP coach as well. But I kept my story private. Mental health was still very much a workplace taboo, particularly in my working area, like a quasi-trading environment. But in approximately 2009, 2010, I think it was, I took a huge risk. I was interviewed together with a very senior HSBC leader for a pioneering article on mental health, because the Time to Change pledge was gathering momentum. And after that, I gradually and quietly got involved in Change the Bank initiatives. And in 2014, when HSBC signed the Time to Change pledge, I spoke at the global launch event. It was absolutely terrifying because it was global. And if someone had told me how many people were watching, I probably wouldn't have done it. But and after that, the UK COO came and asked me, what can we do for you? And I said, I'd like to be an HSBC mental health champion. So alongside my day job, I became the mental health committee lead of the Ability Network, which was for disability, mental health and carers. I then joined the Business Disability Steering Group, liaising with senior leaders, various stakeholders, driving the Time to Change pledge agenda forward with various initiatives and innovations. And then my passion for people and mental health gradually overtook that for the business. So I made some very strategic planning And in 2016, I left for my new beginning. So if we can have the next slide, Zoe, please, that'd be brilliant. But who'd have thought the little old me would be dealing with all these things? It's absolutely incredible. One of the things I'm very proud of is the work in the equestrian industry, taking mental health into the equestrian industry and writing 3 online bespoke mental health and wellbeing resources for them. I look at this and I'm still quite amazed that I do this. But really the crux of the matter is it's building supportive workplaces. It's building mental health competent workplaces. It's empowering workplace mental health. It's raising awareness, providing information and knowledge, but moving along the continuum towards actions. What can we do about it? What can we do with all that information? What can we do with that awareness? What can we do with that knowledge? So it's encouraging to people speak up. It's to look after mental health like we do our physical health. It's spotting signs of changing ourselves and in others, having conversations, all those action pieces. So if I can have the next slide, please, Zoe. So this is the one I think people may have seen in the prelim one, but it really is. And I painted this when I was in counselling training. We were asked to paint our lives. And interestingly, it's still valid today. And I did it quite a few years ago. As you see the black side, and believe it or not, that is a horse and a dog, the 2 things in my life that brought me any joy, the golden transformation, and on the other side, someone once said that was chaos. But no, for me, it's freedom. It's freedom. It's freedom to choose to do the things I want to do, the freedom to follow this passion, and to do the things that I told my counsellor I would do. But what's been interesting is that whilst I've been doing the presentation of these slides and seeing other people's slides, is that I have no photographic evidence of my life up until my golden transformation. And I think we're missing the final slide, aren't we, Zoe? I think we're missing it. Oh, yeah. So anyway, I did this slide with loads and loads of photos on it. I did print it off, and it might look a bit odd, but the point is, there's me and my partner, been together for a long time, me and my horses. I vowed I wanted to go to on the Orient Express to Venice, which I've done. I've been to Florence. We go motorbike racing. I've got a fast car. There's all sorts of wonderful things. And I did put loads more on there, but the file was just too big. But the point of this is that it's a very different life. Very, very different life. And it's all down to having a courageous conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia, very much indeed. The message really resonating, as you said, about the power of the conversation, which is exactly what we are having now. We will come back to you shortly, but thank you so much indeed for sharing that, your really wonderful and positive story. So our next and final ambassador is Fabian Devlin. And Fabian, I'm just going to hand straight over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Zoe. And thank you, Sylvia and Harpreet as well, for those really inspirational stories. They really resonated with me. And I wasn't aware, actually, that the best goes last. So you put pressure on there, Harpreet. I feel a bit of pressure now. But, of course, anyone could have been last. So I just wanted to say, a bit like Sylvia's, mine, just a bit of a trigger warning. Mine does mention or cover the topic of suicide, just so for people to be aware. But I'm one of the 2.6 billion or so people who are still on Facebook. And I must admit, I really enjoy and I love seeing the memories feature. And here are some of the memories that I've shared over the past 12 years. If you flick through to the next slide, Zoe. So as you can see, there's been a lot of dressing up, actually, mainly for children's birthday parties. I've always either been too disorganized or a bit stingy to pay for an entertainer. So I've been Mr. Tumble and Severus Snape and a few other people and the Cookie Monster and Scooby-Doo. But there's also been celebrations of wedding anniversaries, moving home, watching my daughter Cassie grow up into a beautiful teenager, meeting my childhood heroes, among them Alf from Home and Away on the bottom right. So for the children of the 90s, that was quite a thing. But if you move on to the next slide, you'll see that I nearly didn't have any of these memories because 12 years ago, I was in real danger of taking my own life. So this year, if you go on to the next slide, this year, I put together a book, a men's mental health book called Big Boys Don't Cry, with my old school friend, Patrick. And we had supported each other on different occasions when we were going through bad patches. And we wanted to produce a book that we would have found helpful during those times to make us feel less alone. So we collected 60 stories from men and partners of men with very diverse backgrounds. There were postmen, lawyers, businessmen, there was a bomb disposal soldier, a homeless man, professional sportsman, so a real cross-section of society. And they all had a real range of different mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a real sort of gamut of mental illness. And in the book, we asked them, each of the men, to give their advice for other men going through similar difficulties or similar experience. And we had over 200 different tips in total, which we boiled down into 10 top tips, which is relevant for men and women. And I'll share with you these later. But first, I'd like to read you my story, which I told for the first time in this book earlier this year. I'm planning to take my life. A suicide note to my wife and my a suicide note to my wife and 9-month-old daughter sits on my lap. This is it. This is what it comes down to. What a loser and waste of space I am. This is how I found myself 12 years ago, age 32 in 2008. It feels surreal reading this now, but thankfully I'm still here to tell the tale. So how and why did it come to this? And what lessons have I learned? Well, I've suffered from anxiety and depression from an early age. We have a history of mental illness in the family, and it's a constant battle. The usual sequence of events for me is that I start feeling anxious about something. 9 out of 10 times it's to do with work. And I quickly and completely lose confidence in myself, and then it spirals into a deep depression. I also suffer from what I've now learned is called the Imposter Syndrome, where I feel like a fraud who's going to be found out at any moment. Despite 19 years' experience in my career, I constantly live in fear that someone will call me out and say, this guy is absolutely hopeless at his job. You are so busted. That overwhelming, all-consuming, debilitating fear has led me to want to take my own life on several occasions. And what stops me? Well, quite simply, the love I have for my wife and my daughter. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." I've realized that we all have a why. Mine's my family. So if you can find your purpose and keep it in mind, you can live a much happier, more peaceful life. A real turning point for me came in 2018, when I made the step to speak openly to my local GP, who really took the time to listen to me. I was very resistant at the time to taking any kind of medication, but the doctor made a helpful comparison, saying, if you had a physical illness like diabetes, you wouldn't think twice about taking insulin. He also pointed out that half the town was taking some sort of medication. So I decided in the end to try an antidepressant called citalopram, later moving on to a low dose of vortioxetine, which helped lift me out of the depression, ease my anxiety, and enable me to start helping myself. Since then, I've explored a wide range of tools and techniques, from mindfulness, running, and reading, to yoga, boxing, and cold therapy. That last one didn't last too long, to help look after my mental health. Some things work, some don't. The point is to be open to anything that might help you and to have as many weapons in your armory as possible. I hope this story helps you. Together we can fight this illness and show everyone just how strong we really are. So that's my story. And if we move on to the next couple of slides, Here's a summary of the top 10 tips I mentioned earlier that we drew from all the different stories. So we just move on to the next slide, please, sorry. So they're a little bit small there for you to read, but I'll read through them. So at number 10 was hobbies. Finding something to be passionate about, just to distract yourself from the grind in your mind, was recommended by many of the men in the book. Photography, gardening, Sudoku, whatever you're interested in, try and make time for old hobbies and be open to new ones too. At number 9, something that Harpreet was talking about, faith. Having a belief in something greater than yourself, be it God, Buddha, Allah, or another higher power, is a great comfort to many of those who shared their story. In a world which places such a high value on commercial and material success, having something spiritual in their lives gave these men a greater sense of meaning and purpose. At number 8, again, we saw it in Harpreet's story, but the men in the book advised to avoid alcohol or drug abuse. So the message from these men in the book was clear: turning to drink and drugs or any kind of self-medication to avoid your problems, although very tempting and understandable, is simply not the answer. Those men who have recovered or are recovering from an addiction say that they only became or only began to get better mentally when they became sober. Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, and their 12 Steps program is cited as a great support for many men struggling with alcohol addiction. At number 7 was self-acceptance and self-compassion. Learning to tame your inner critic and accept yourself for who you are, warts and all, was seen as a key step in recovery for many of the book's contributors. Being kind and compassionate to yourself, lowering your high standards, and trying to avoid the pitfall of perfectionism were common themes within the men's stories. Number 6, exercise. Whether it's an individual activity like running, going to the gym, or taking a yoga class, or a team sport like football, rugby, and cricket, a large number of men pointed to the proven benefits of physical exercise. Despite often struggling with fatigue, listlessness, and lack of motivation, they found that even 5 minutes of exercise released those helpful endorphins, and which made them feel a whole lot better. Number 5, mindfulness. The simple act of focusing on your breathing and learning to be present, not ruminating on the past or worrying about the future, is a surprising and enlightening game changer described by many of the men in the book who'd previously thought that the meditation was, as one writer put it, airy-fairy. Definitely worth giving it a go if you haven't tried it before. Number 4, visit your GP. Often one of the first steps that the men in the book took. Speaking to their doctor was the start of their recovery, and just having a trusted, neutral person listen to their problems and offer guidance and support made the effort to pick up the phone and call the local surgery extremely worthwhile. Number 3, medication. Many of the men writing in the book admit to feeling skeptical and afraid at first of taking antidepressants, often SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors as they're known, such as citalopram or Prozac. But they found that medication really helped lift them out of a dark place. Combining prescribed medicine with another of the activities found on this list, especially talking therapy, is recommended as the best approach. Number 2, therapy. Whether it's group therapy arranged by your local National Health Service, a peer group, or one-to-one group therapy with one-to-one therapy with a private therapist, the benefits of sharing your negative thoughts previously locked inside your head with an impartial and non-judgmental listener are immeasurable. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which helps manage your problems by changing the way you think and behave, was a very popular approach taken by the men in this book. And at number 1, without doubt, the most important step you can take is talking. Nearly every man in the book stresses how crucial it is to reach out to family and friends when you're struggling, however impossible it may seem at the time. Not one of the men said that they had regretted opening up about their problems, and many of them said it had literally saved their lives. So I want to end this talk with a few messages for managers. So mental illness is often shrouded in the following. If you just click through, Zoe, silence, secrets, and shame. And I've been aware throughout my 19-year career of many people at work who've been struggling with mental illness, but it's just been hushed up or brushed under the carpet. And this is how people like me feel when we're suffering. We want to work. We want to be well. We feel guilty because we can't work. We just click one more time, Zoe, but we're ill. And so what do we want from and what do we need from our managers? Well, we need time, we need your patience, and we need you to back us. And my heartfelt message to managers is to be flexible, be kind, and just be human. And then I've got a message for employees. So please look out for one another. Try and spot those often subtle signs that your colleagues might give you. So it might be just withdrawing within yourself, putting on your headphones. I think I used to go for the whole day with just my headphones in, listening to music and just withdrawing from the workspace, going out at lunch, not joining in those conversations, or just acting out of character. But really, for employees, the message is just to try and open up and seek help. Be brave. It's really difficult, but once you've made that first step and you open up, as the other guys have said, other people will open up as well. That's what people did for me. I'll just end by saying that mental health is everyone's business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabian, really. 3 incredible stories, all about the power of telling the story and talking. So I invite the audience, please, to send in any questions or comments. We've had one particular one from a fellow champion who was in the last webinar saying, really incredible stories from all 3 ambassadors. Fabian's story especially hit home. Well done, and thank you to all 3 ambassadors for their candour, bravery, and their passion for positive change. So, yeah, really, really incredible. So I'm going to kick off, actually, Fabian, just with you. As very eloquently, I think you really pointed out and gave something for managers to think about. Have you had any examples yourself? Should I say maybe negative examples with a manager? Before you answer that, I think, especially in this time, it's really tough for managers at the moment. There is a lot going on. So I'm not excusing managers at the moment, but I do think managers have got a very tough time and an awful lot to look out for at the moment. But just wondered whether you have had any negative experiences with managers when you tried to say anything about your mental health.
Yeah, sadly I have. I mean, I would echo that. It is really difficult to be a manager. I was a manager myself, and you know, even though I've been through sort of the anxiety, depression, it is still quite difficult to pick up on people because you wear a mask. Look at what Sylvia said. You know, she came in that after going through that lift, she put on a mask. You know, everything was fine. So it is very difficult to pick up. But what I would say is that when people do open up, be alert to it and then actually act on it. I think that's the key thing. And in my case, my manager sort of did pick up that I was acting out of character. And he asked me to come to his office, and I went, and he said, Fabian, I can see you're not happy. And I said, well, you might be struggling. I said, yeah, I am struggling. And I said, how I was suffering with, anxiety and struggling with a piece of work that we were doing at that time. And he goes, well, Fabian, that's not good. I thought, oh, well, that's quite encouraging. He goes, that's not good because one of our organizational values is fun. And as a senior manager, if you're not projecting fun, then it's going to have an impact on everyone else. And I just thought, well, I said, I just can't clip my fingers and be fun, But I thought after that, and he was very much saying, well, look, just tell me, can you do this job or not? Can you do it? Just let me know now, and kind of give me a little bit of an ultimatum that he would go and look for someone else. And that really didn't help. I really did need him to say, look, you know, you've got this, we will support you all the way, you know, whatever you need, you know, we'll give you that time, you know, listen. I just needed to know that I had that support, because you're already feeling quite vulnerable, I guess. So when someone does open up to you, you know, if you could take it seriously, I guess, and ask them afterwards. My manager never asked me afterwards how I was. So you know, when someone puts themselves in that position, I think as a manager, it's your responsibility. I mean, at the time, this was the chief executive. I think it is your responsibility to follow up on it and check that they're okay at periodical times. So it is difficult being a manager, but I do think you have that kind of duty of care to look after your staff, and you get the best out of them. I mean, you'll get the best out of them if you can treat them well.
Thank you, Fabian. So a few comments coming through here. Just to say, not a question, just to say thank you all for sharing. Really interesting to hear about the importance of faith in mental health. I often feel that equality in the workplace can push faith out rather than embrace its diversity and mental well-being benefits. I think that's a really, really good point. Also, somebody has said, interestingly, as an occupational health professional, we deal with these issues regularly, so don't forget us if the service is available in your workplace. Oh, Sylvie absolutely wants to say something on that. Go on.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that. It's something that Fabian was saying earlier about managers. I think if managers are more aware of, if you do spot one of your employees struggling, be aware of your organisational support that you have and signpost that person to the support. So if you're actually taking an action and doing something, and that then taps into the duty of care. So things like, you know, not necessarily HR, but as that attendee said, occupational health. Find out if your organisation provides any counselling or coaching. And quite often organisations do, but quite often they're buried and people don't know where they are. I remember people used to say, well, look on the intranet, or for example, HSBC, there's hundreds of intranets. Signpost people to the correct support, because quite often the organisation provides it, but and signpost that person to it. So again, if you're an employee or a boss or a line manager, spot the signs. Did you know that XYZ Corporation provides occupational health, mentoring, coaching, and signpost them to it, and don't just tell them to look on the intranet. Give them the link so they can go and find it themselves. And then that also protects their privacy, because quite often people don't, in my experience, don't want to talk up because it's a very private matter. We bang on about talk, but a lot of the time people still want it to be private. If they know where to find the support, once you've overcome that hurdle that you know you need support, then find out where to, how to get it. So the organisations quite often will provide it, but for people to know it exists.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvia. Just a few more comments that I want to get through. Also, you know, what you said, Sylvia, about going to the GP. Somebody has said, thank you so much for sharing your stories. They have all really touched me. I was depressed and asked my GP and received CBT training, and that really helped me. I don't think people realise how much the GP can help if you just ask for it. So I think that's a really valid point as well. Go on, yeah.
Just a quick one. You may not know this, but something that Mind, actually I found on the Mind site, that you can request a longer session than the 10 minutes slot. So if you can ask for a longer session, you can get a 20-minute slot, half an hour. Because sometimes you might feel a bit rushed, because the doctors are quite limited. But if you say to the surgery, I need a little bit longer, they will give you that.
Oh, really useful. Thank you for that. Harpreet, I've got a question here for you. Somebody has asked, have you seen changes in more recent years in the cultures and attitudes in the South Asian community towards mental ill health?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I think the most sort of obvious change is that we're having discussions in different languages, because the first sort of migrants that came over, they had their language, and there was a sort of communication issue when it came to talking about your feelings, but their main sort of purpose was survival. So like my mum, for example, would work 16, 18 hours a day just to keep food on the table, have a roof over our head. But obviously as the decades go on, those first, second, third generation migrants, they don't have those issues anymore. And they're able to really look back and reflect and say, okay, what have we gone through as a family, as a society? What issues are around now, and how can we communicate them more? The things that I'm seeing alongside different languages is we're moving the mental health discussion into spaces where they were never held before. So, for example, places of worship. My local Godre, they are constantly talking about it, again in different languages and whatnot, trying to raise more awareness. On our sort of Seek channels as well, there's segments in different languages talking about mental health. So it's a definite, the last decade alone has been a huge change. Prior to that, it was almost unheard of, but suddenly we're a lot more sort of free to talk about it, and the support out there is now more readily available.
Great. And for you personally, Harpreet, when you started talking about it, how was the reaction from your family?
So the reaction was actually quite different between friends and family. So family, especially my family, never really take anything you say seriously because they grew up with you. So if you say, "Oh, I'm really struggling to get out of bed this morning," they're like, "Well, you've been sleeping in until 1 o'clock, you know, for the past 5-6 years. What do you think is going to happen?" And so it's really hard to sort of convince them, look, this isn't something that, you know, like a bad habit. It's an actual issue I'm going through. So family took a while to come over, but I think now that we're older, a bit more wiser, and we've changed and we've actually dealt with our own issues, we as a family can have conversations about mental health. But that took a while. I found with friends it was a lot easier to have the conversation because they're a lot more open and they don't really see you behind closed doors. So they see, like Sylvia mentioned, the mask that you sort of put on. So when you talk about these things, you're letting your guard down, and then people, you know, take you a bit more seriously. So the reaction has always been better with friends than family, a bit delayed with family. But with friends, I guess the best reaction that I get, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is people reaching out saying, "Thank you for talking about this," because nobody in our circles speaks about this. And if one person speaks about it, then so does another, and then we slowly start to normalize it. And the reaction is, well, actually, we're all going through these things. It's not a hidden secret anymore. Let's all talk about it together.
Great, thank you. Another comment has come in here. Thank you to all of the champions for sharing your stories. There are elements from all your stories that resonated with me, so thank you again. Those special mentions to Sylvia and going on the Orient Express. I've always wanted to do that and have been thinking about it again recently, so definitely on my to-do list post-COVID.
Got to be done. Got to be done.
Got to think about the good things in life as well. Okay, yeah. So sort of as we come to the end, you know, I think just a little kind of 1 minute sum up from all of you. I think we've all seen a lot of progress and we're all talking about mental health, but we are not there yet. And there are plenty of people that are not talking about mental health or don't see the value in it yet. So kind of my, I suppose what I ask you is, what message have you got for those people who either don't see the value in talking about mental health, or are that still, I think, majority of person that hasn't come forward and doesn't feel able to be honest, you know, and be able to be open. So, you know, Fabian, I go to you first. You know, what message do you have someone in that situation?
Yeah, mine's more
get to their GP or whatever yet, because you know.
Yeah, mine's more to the latter, really, to those people who are struggling. In the book, we managed to get the rights to use the lyrics from "Everybody Hurts" by REM, and the last line on that is "You are not alone." And I think it's so easy to forget that, really, that when you're in that spiral, when you're in the bed, when you're you know out of bed, you think you're the only person struggling with anxiety or depression or suicidal ideation or whatever it may be. But of course you're not. And I think, you know, if you do step forward, if you can speak to someone, just one person, then you will feel so much better and you won't feel so alone. And the only other thing I would say is that this is mental health is a management process. You don't just wake up one day and you're fine. It's something you need to manage throughout your life, and that's what I've kind of resolved myself with. And sometimes you don't. So I think it's kind of, you know, it's a management process. You're not alone, and there is help out there for you. And your manager probably does want to help you, but you need to be brave. You need to take that step.
Okay, thank you. 1 minute sum up, Sylvia.
Talk. Simple. It's I know it might sound, put it around the other way. What happens if you don't? You might lose out on all the things that you could have, the life you should have, the life you ought to have, all the things that you could and would like to do, just for the sake of talking. Find someone to talk. There are so many more mediums now to do it these days, and even if it's not face to face, but do find the courage. We're 3 people here that have spoken up, and we've all benefited from it. So look at us as living proof that it works.
Great, thank you. And Harpreet, the best for last, Harpreet.
Why am I always in the middle?
So I guess my sort of 1-minute advice is essentially, this is more to people that haven't been brought into the mental health discussion yet, because you're right, there are people that object to it. My main advice is don't wait for it to happen to you or somebody you love for you to take it seriously. Listen to other people's stories, you know, empathize with them, and then, you know, see what you can do as an individual in terms of your family, in your workplace, anywhere you have an influence, because mental health is here to stay. It's going to be here for the long run. The more complex life gets, as human beings, we are going to struggle with it. And I'll just finish with an analogy. So there's 3 types of people. The first person sees a storm coming and makes a sort of arrangements. The second person, when the storm is here, actually deals with it. And the third person is, once the storm has passed, they deal with it. All 3 apply to mental health, but try not to be the third person, because as we know, you know, suicide rates are going up, and sometimes you might not be around to deal with it after the storm has passed. So, you know, preempt it, see where it's coming from, use the tools available, the knowledge we have as a collective, and really work together to sort of shelter ourselves from the storms.
Wow, thank you. Really, my thanks go to these 3 ambassadors who are so eloquent and have told such powerful stories. So thank you to each and every one of you for sharing your stories today. And of course, thank you to the audience who've listened, who've been interested, who have participated, sent in their questions and comments. We really value having you along on our journey together. So thank you everybody very, very much indeed for joining us today. Just a quick request, please check out this year's agenda for This Can Happen. It's now up on the website and talking about all these things, plus a lot more at the conference this year. So thank you everybody. Hope you'll join us again for another webinar in the future. Have a good rest of your day. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.